All right, continuing with this same theme, the feet as they connect to the legs and the torso. Just begin by lying on your back. Right, notice your contact. You can spend as long as you like. I'd recommend a few minutes doing a scan. We're just going to keep rolling forward here. So take hold of the fibular head, right? So the fibular head is going to be corresponding to the outer ankle bone, right? This is your fibula, right? My fibula head really sticks out quite a bit, so it's very easy for me to grab hold of it. But find your fibular head and just take your thumb and your index finger, so your thumb is behind it, right? Your finger is in front, and just start by make a movement of rolling your foot to the outside. Right, so you roll your foot to the outside. So as you roll your foot to the outside, just do a small movement. You feel that the inner arch is lifting in the foot. My fibular head goes backwards, right? Now, if I lift the inner arch of the outer arch of the foot right here, I feel that the fibular head moves forward. All right, so do that a few times for yourself just so you can clarify the anatomy and you have a sense, oh, I've got a bone there, I've got a joint. It can move and it's relative to the foot. So you could actually just consciously move the fibular head backwards, right? So if you move your fibular head back, you'll see that you can lift the inner arch, right? You can try doing it forward as well. Right, so it can go either way. It also, you'll see it connects to the hip as well, right? So as you move the fibular head, you can feel that there's some action going on in the gluteal muscles. All right, so let's go into a bridge position. All right, so that's on your back with your knees bent. Feet are about shoulder width apart. All right, make sure that your legs aren't tilting. And just start with the same leg that you were just feeling and just begin to lift the inner edge of your foot a few times, just a little bit. Right, so feel like the outer half of your foot gets heavy, like it fills up with sand. Right, so the inside lifts. Right, and notice the movement that you feel in the shin, in the fibular head, and in the hip. Right, then do the same on the outside. Right, so you lift the outside edge. Right, and notice that in this case, we're not isolating the movement to an arch of the foot, or rather, you're lifting the edge. Right? See if you can't sense anything going on, you could find it. Find your fibular head and see what you notice. You're not being judged on any of this. This is just for your own curiosity. Right? Take a rest. Try the other leg a few times. Lift the inside edge. Lift the outside Does this side feel easier, or is it more stiff? Is it more difficult? Good. Now think more of the inner arch, right? So imagine there's a vacuum that you're sucking up a little grain of sand that's positioned right under the center of the arch, right? So you lift the arch just a little bit, right? And feel what that does to the leg, to the fibular head, and to the hip. Yep. And try the outside edge. Now you're lifting the outer arch. Good. And a few times just compare the right side and the left side. Good. Now do both at the same time, right? So you're going to lift the outer edge, and then you'll lift the inner edge. And then you'll lift the outer arch, and then you'll lift the inner arch. Good. Lower your legs and rest. Bend your knees. Right, so now you're just going to do a bridge, right? So you're going to lift up your hips and come down. Feel what happens to the feet as you do the bridge. Most of the time, we're going to focus on the glutes, right? The buttock as you do a bridge, right? Because that's the prime mover. It's the muscle you're trying to strengthen, right? So here, though, we're gonna go into the feet a little bit. So I'm gonna start by lifting the outer arch, and I feel like I'm turning the legs in just a little bit, right? Then I'm going to release that and feel that the inner arch starts to lift, and that's going to lift my pelvis, right? So as I go down, I'm beginning to lift the outer edge. And as I come up, I release it. And I'm lifting the inner edge, or rather the arch. Right? So if I think of the movement initiating from the arches, right, it engages my hips in a different way, right? I start to get that internal and external rotation, right? So as I lift the outer edge or the outer arch, I get internal rotation. And then as I switch to lifting the inner arch, they start to rotate out, right? And that just kind of brings the ball into the socket and lifts up my pelvis, right? Then I go the other way, lift the outer arch, and then lift the inner. And so here I'm starting to get a finer control of the hip because I am being more conscious of how I'm using my feet. Right? So I talked about the fibular head before, right? So I could do the same thing, but focus on the fibular head. So I will pull the fibular head back and then I lift, right? And then I pull it forward, which is rotating my shin and my hip internally, right? And then I pull it back and I pull it forward, right? So they both connect, the foot and the fibular head, right? They're both doing the same thing. On a more macro scale, what's happening is as I'm coming into the beginning of the bridge, there's a compression, right? So I'm spiraling inwards, and it's like I'm compressing a spring, and then I release it, and I expand, right? So it's compressing and expanding, right? These are Tai Chi sort of images that I like to use. Of course, I can also think of the heel and the ankle as part of these movements as well, right? That just adds another layer to it, right? So here as I come down, I'm thinking of pulling my heel into the earth. And then as I come up, it releases, right? And my ankle thrusts forward. Yep. And you can get a sense of this by practicing cat-cow and playing with how you use your feet and your ankles as you do your cat-cow, and you can start to see how things are connected, right? And that really helps if you like to lift weights or whatever you like to do. It applies to function first and foremost. It applies to how you sit to stand and how you walk and go up and down stairs. But if you like to lift weights or you like to run and stuff like that, this fine motor control that you can develop in the feet, the legs, and the hips can better translate into learning how to use your core in a more effective way instead of just doing this kind of bracing strategy that sometimes people get into a habit of doing. Even just a small degree of conscious awareness of what is my foot doing, right? How is the inner arch? How is the outer arch? How is the heel, right? How is the fibular head? Simply noticing it on a conscious level will change the way that you're moving for the better. Right, so we're just gonna come up and we'll bring up, right? So we did the bridge, right? So we're spiraling in, we release, right? Spiraling in, release. So I could lift my legs where I feel like I'm spiraling in, right? And then lift up, right? So that's spiraling out, right? So here I spiral in, I'm going into a compression, right? Into a ball, and then I open up, right? So here you can see I'm going onto the ball of my foot because my ankle wants to thrust forward, right? So here as I go into the ball, right? As I come into the ball, I'm like this, and then I'm like that. So that can be a fun way to to play with the pattern. And of course, you could start to go and explore some single leg things, right? So that you start to feel how the hip gives you rotation, and you can feel how the arch and the fibular head can control some of that rotation. And this would give you a sense, this is relevant to walking, right? So a lot of people get very stiff in the hip joint, right? They lose that rotation. They do all kinds of stretches, but they don't know how to actually integrate the movement into their daily life, right? Namely walking. So because they keep walking the same way, all that stretching that they do doesn't translate into function. So doing something like this where you're a little more conscious of the movement gives your brain and your nervous system a chance to better integrate it. So you're more likely going to use the newfound mobility in your daily movement.